Hi everyone, welcome to the Swift Arcade. I'm your host, Jonathan Rasmussen. Super excited to be here with you today. I've been working on a new app, the Starbucks app, and I've had a lot of fun trying to build and replicate all the functionality that the Starbucks app has. So if we look over here, for instance, we've got kind of a scrollable view. We've got a nice collapsible header at the top here. There's an expandable rewards section with a cool little animation in it. There's a floating scan button, and this is all inside various navigation and tab bar controllers. And if we have time later on, I'll go in and fill these other view controllers. But basically, I learned a ton building this. I'd like to share some of the cool things I learned with you. So if you're interested in seeing how the Starbucks app was built, some of the mechanics and what went into it, stick around. In this episode, we're going to start with the high-level architecture and break it down from there. Okay, good stuff. We'll see you in there. So the first thing you probably notice when you click around the Starbucks application is it's very obvious there's a tab bar here. So no matter what we do, we're going to want to have some kind of tab bar. Also, in the real Starbucks app, there's a few more buttons up here. Each of these view controllers here has a nav bar. So the ability to drill deeper from each view controller here is something else we'd like to do. So at a high level, what we're looking at is a tab bar with view controllers, and each view controller containing its own nav bar. So it looks something like this. What we're going to do is to deal with each of these tab bars at the bottom, we're going to create a dedicated view controller for each tab. That view controller will have its own nav bar, and we just need to associate the view controller with the right tab bar. And that at the high level is kind of the architecture we're going to go for here. The way we're going to set this up is in the app delegate. So when we create this project from scratch, we're going to go into the app delegate and we're going to create some view controllers here. We're going to give each view controller, we're going to embed them in their own nav controller. And then each nav controller is going to be passed into the tab bar controller. And that's how we associate different view controllers with each of these tab buttons. And just to keep it easy in the beginning, we're just going to change the color. And then eventually we're going to drill down and fill in the view controllers doing this kind of fun stuff. So that's the high-level architecture in a nutshell. Let's now fire up Xcode and build this project from scratch. Okay, so let's fire up Xcode and go Shift-Command-N to create a new project. Let's just resize this a bit. Let's start with a single view application. And let's go ahead and call this Starbucks. And we're not going to use anything here. We have to start with storyboards, unfortunately, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and save this on my desktop. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to get rid of the storyboards and we're going to start with a brand new project from scratch. So we can go ahead and delete main.storyboard here. So just select that and go Command Delete, and we will move that to trash. We also don't need this scene delegate, so just select it and go Command Delete. We can get rid of that. Not sure why that keeps popping up over there. And then the other thing I like to do is we don't necessarily need all these files right now, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new group without folder, and I'm just going to call this Files. And I'm just going to stick the assets, the launch board, and the info list. I'm going to drag those into there because we're not going to worry about those a ton. And then the final thing to get rid of our storyboards is we need to go into the info P list and delete two entries here. One is this main storyboard file based name. We can hit the negative sign there. And also this application scene manifest. Go ahead and hit that negative sign there. And if we do that, it won't run quite yet because what we're going to do next is we're going to go into the app delegate and we are just going to delete everything we see in here. We're not interested in scenes or anything. And then I've got a little code snippet here that just helps me out. Let me just bring this over here. This is basically just some code that I've already got typed in here as a shortcut. I'm going to call this, I call it no storyboards, and it just fills in the code I need to launch a view controller in a window from scratch. So we're just creating a window. We're in did finish launching with options. We're just going to take that window, make key invisible. I'm going to set a background color and then set the root view controller to be my view controller. And that's all we need to do. If I go Command now, R now, and run this, that's all we need to do to get our application set up from scratch and running without a storyboard. So if we do that, we've got a blank canvas, and that's great. We're good to go. Now, the first thing I like to do here is actually create a tab bar and just get that running in my application. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and go let, and here we're just going to create a tab bar right in our application app delegate. Let's call it TabBarController, and that's going to be equal to a UITabBarController. Whoops. And I'm also going to stop running the simulator so it'll help with autocomplete. And the way these tab bar controllers work is they basically take an array of view controllers representing each section there on the bottom. So when we get our application built, each one of these is going to be its own view controller. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a tab bar and get it up and running, and we'll just pass it one view controller to get going. So let's go tab bar controller dot view controllers, and let's let that equal to an array of view controllers. And then also let's make that window, we're not going to set the root view controller to be the standard view controller that comes with the app for us. We're actually going to set that to be the tab bar controller, and that's going to contain all of our good view controllers in there. So just for fun, let's go ahead and pass in a view controller here, the one that we start with from scratch. And I'm just going to run this and see what happens. Okay, well, we can see it did something down there. No icons or anything are showing up. And that's because we haven't set any icons, given it any titles or anything, but we can see there is a tab bar down there. Now let's see if we can get something showing up here. Let's go over to our view controller and see if we can't get something to show up down here. Now I'm going to show you something really cool. First, I'm just going to bring in some code, which is going to set that tab bar button item for us. And then I want to explain to you what's going on here. So basically the way we set these items at the bottom here is these are called UITabBar items. And basically we can give them a name and an image. And in this case, when I built the app, I wanted to try to get something close to the Starbucks application, but something that was also easy to use. I wanted to avoid cutting a lot of custom images. So what I'm actually doing here is using something called SF Symbols. This is a really cool thing. SF Symbols is an app you can download, which shows you all of the symbols that are already built into Xcode and iOS. So we can make use of these as images in our code, and they're really handy for these little icons down here. So for example, to find this home or house icon, I went into SF Symbols, and I think I typed something like home, and you can see here, these are various symbols I can use. And again, these are all built into iOS, so you won't find these in the asset catalog. And by just noting the name of these, in this case, this one called house.fill, I can come back into my code, create an image called house.fill using this configuration thing. This means make the icon large. And I can use that image in my UI tab bar item. And we can do that to set these images down here. So if we add this home image with a title of home to our app here and run this, we'll get a nice little icon at the bottom here that says home. Hey, that's pretty cool. And now that we've got this one added, adding these other icons is simply a matter of creating more view controllers and adding them in here just like this. So let's go back to our app delegate and let's just do that. And for fun, so let's just take a look at what we need here. Whoops. We would like a home, a scan, an order, and a gift. Okay. Let's see if we can go ahead and create these. Now, just because I know I'm going to be doing this a lot, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a refactoring right here. I'm going to create a parent view controller, which is going to just take care of some initialization for us. And it's also going to help us set those tab bar items in a slightly more convenient way. So I'm just going to do all this work right in app delegate. We can extract it later. But here I'm going to create something called a Starbucks view controller. This is just a plain old view controller. It's going to take these. It's going to override the standard initializer, just like this, the nib name bundle. I'm going to set each of those equal to nil. I'm not really doing anything with nibs here. And then I'm just going to add one method here called common init. This is just something I like to do to have a common initialization function in my view controllers. This required is just something we need. I'm just going to pull it up here in the parent so all of our children don't need to worry about it. And then down in here, I'm going to create a method called setTabBarItem, which is just going to take our SF symbol image name along with our title and then do that work that we just did here. It's going to create the configuration, create the image item and the tab bar button item. Then when it comes to creating the other view controllers that we want to add in here, so what we're going to do is we're just going to add more view controllers to our array of view controllers for our tab bar controller here. To do that now, I can just come in here and instantiate a scan view controller, order view controller, a GIF view controller, each of them using their own SF symbol code and title. And they're all going to extend the Starbucks view controller. And just by doing that and overriding this common init, I can just set the tab bar conveniently for each one. So this is a little bit of refactoring. All we're doing here is setting up different view controllers, each of which is going to represent a different tab bar button here. And then I'm just going to set the background for now, just to know that when we've tapped them, they will go ahead and change color. So let's go ahead and use those now. Down here, let's just go ahead and instantiate each of these just like this. So we're going to have a home, a scan, an order, a gift, and a store. Oh, and I'm just going to rename our regular view controller here. I'm going to call it, I might as well make it our home view controller. Home is going to be our very first view controller here representing this guy. So I'm just going to call that home view controller. I'm just going to rename that class there. So we'll take that guy over. And I'm just going to make him just like all the other ones. I'm going to go ahead and extend this Starbucks view controller. And because it's going to take care of that tab bar configuration for me, I can go ahead and just call this parent class up here. On the parent, it's just going to set up my home fill and house fill like that. And with that now, if we go back to our app delegate and we actually go ahead and use these, we should be able just to take each one of these view controllers, like our home VC, our scan VC, our order VC, our gift VC, and our store VC. And by setting all of those in here, let's just go ahead and run this and see if this will compile. Voila, we've got our home items here. And they're tappable. As we click on them, we know we're bringing up our right view controller because the background is changing, which is great. And that's really cool. We've got a tab bar presenting different view controllers as we touch and tap each one. Good stuff. Now this is really good, but I think what we're going to want later is actually to have each one of these view controllers embedded in a nav controller so that we can drill down and do some push pops down navigation in our view controllers to drill deeper down for each one. So to set that up, what we need to do is for every one of these view controllers here, we need to create an equivalent navigation controller and then put that view controller into that navigation controller for each one. So now home, scan, order, gift, and store will all be embedded in a navigation controller. And then we simply take each one of those, and that's what we pass in to our tab bar now. So our tab bar now will have navigation controllers, each one containing its respective view controller. And that's how we're going to set up the architecture for the entire app. It's just going to be view controllers embedded in navigation controllers, all of which are embedded in a tab view controller. So if we run this now, we can see we've got a slightly different look. We've got a navigation bar at the top, which is good. That shows us we're embedded in a nav bar, and it's taking the title and setting it there also. All right, good stuff. Now, just before we wrap up, there's one more thing I'd like to do. I'd like to put some kind of title up here on the home view controller, right in that navigation bar here. I'd like to say something like, "Good afternoon, Jonathan." So we can do that. Let's go back to our home view controller. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to add a method here called setup navbar. So as soon as we come into view to load, we're going to go setup navbar, and that's going to be a function down here called setup navbar. And in here, we are going to basically take that navigation controller and set the title on it by doing this. We're going to go navigation controller, which is an optional for us, but it's a property built right into every view controller. And if we have one, which we know we do because we're embedded inside one, we're going to grab that navigation bar, we're going to grab the top item, and we're going to set the title to be Good Afternoon, Jonathan. So let's just run this now and see what this looks like. And there we go. Good, we've got a Good Afternoon, Jonathan. That looks not bad. That's a step in the right direction. Ultimately, we're going to be going for something more like this, but this is a bit more work. We're not there yet. But for now, I just want to show you one way that we could get a really quick win here if we wanted something that looks like this, but maybe isn't quite as rich as doing that full collapsible thing. What we can do in the app delegate is we can set up something called large titles on a navigation bar. So this is a standard navigation bar title. You simply set the title up here, and it's what it appears as you drill down into various view controllers. The title will update itself, but we can do something a little bit more fancy. What we can do is we can go back into our app delegate. We can add a function here called make navigation controller, and we're going to actually call that on our home controller. So go ahead and just replace UINavigationController with the call to this function, make navigation controller, which is going to return a navigation controller. But let's walk through this function and let me show you how we can style that navigation bar at the very top and give it some really nice large titles. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and create another navigation controller and embed the root view controller in it. So in this case, it's just going to take the home VC we've passed and still set it as the root here. So that's fine. We're basically just replicating that call here. But look at this line here. Navigation controller.navbar prefer large titles. That's an option we can give our navigation bar, which is going to take that little title up there and make it really big. Now, actually, let's just see what happens if we run that. I'm going to comment this stuff out for a second. Let's just run this. And if we do, voila, that's what we get. This is really nice. This is a large title on a navigation bar. Obviously, we've run out of some room here. It's not quite fitting everything that we've liked, but this is just a really quick, simple one-liner where you can take a navigation controller, grab its navigation bar, and set your titles to be these large titles, which sometimes you'll see in various iOS applications. So we want to style something a little bit like this. And as you can see, it's kind of similar. It's definitely bigger. So one way that we can actually style or change the fonts, the bolding, and what appears here is using something called an NS attributed string. If you haven't heard of these before, don't worry about it. These attributed strings give you basically a means of changing fonts, setting sizes and stuff like that. And they're really handy. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and use the mechanics behind an attributed string to basically make, we're going to pick the foreground color of our title up here. We're going to make it a color called UI, just plain label. It's just called plain label because we can have a dark mode or a light mode, and iOS is smart enough to figure out whether to make it black or white. So that's why we're not actually going to go black here. We're just going to call it UI label, so it can flip between them two, so it can flip between the two automatically. And then we're going to give it a specific font. Here we're going to go and use a preferred font of title 1. That's a very big title, title 1. And this with traits here, this is a little bit of code that I am going to bring in because it's not immediately obvious how to bold things. And I know we'd like to bold things. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to create a new file. I'm going to go Command N, return. I'm going to call it factories. And in here, I'm just going to add an extension to UIKit. And what this is basically going to do for us is enable us to apply bold to a preferred font. So the way we do this is with this with traits attribute. We're going to go bold, and it's going to take whatever font we pass it and apply this trait of bold to it. And by adding this extension here, we come back to our app delegate. This is how we can take a preferred font and add bold to it. Actually, I don't even need that. I can just go dot bold. There we go. So we're going to have a bold title one, and we just do that via that extension. Now, if we run this, we'll see that we can affect and change the styling of those preferred large titles at the top. Here we can choose a different font. We can still make it bold, and voila. That's just a nice step towards where we want to go. We're not actually going to use this in the final app, but I just wanted you to see this, so that if you are building applications that do want to use the large titles, now you'll know how to do it. Okay, this was a really good start. Let's just quickly recap what we've done here. We've built a brand new application with some tab bars, and within each tab, we have a view controller that's embedded in a navigation controller. We saw how we could set and create these things called large titles in our navigation tiles. And we've got a pretty good architecture set up here. We're now free to go in and start filling in the blanks and actually building the application and filling things out. Come back in the next episode, and what we're going to take a look at is we're going to see how we can take this title at the top and give it that nice swish up and down and start working on this thing that I'm just calling a collapsible header. Okay, thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope that was useful. Come back next time, and we'll see you then. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.